If you've ever seen me in presentation mode, you've never seen me sitting on a stage. I'm always standing, I'm always in motion, because it is the motion that moves the energy. And I had someone ask me in an interview recently, Greg, how do you remember everything that you remember when you're on the stage? And I said, I was surprised at the question, first of all. And I said, I couldn't possibly remember everything. I have no idea. I know what the slides in a presentation will look like. I have no idea what I'm going to say. And that's why every presentation is different, because it is being present in the moment with the people, in the hearts, in the minds, in the souls in that room. And my mantra, literally, as I walk from backstage out onto a stage, my mantra to the universe is, I become empty so I can become full. In my emptiness, I'm present for whatever is needed in that moment. And that's where the magic happens. And the same thing happens with music. Same thing happens with music.
And when you move martial arts and yoga,
yes,
you could probably go to another space, or
it's always been, it's the integration of mind and body and spirit together. Martial arts, not for the purpose of necessarily of self-defense, but it's the purpose of the discipline. I've always been drawn to the discipline of yogic traditions. I've spent much of my adult life researching, and Sarah, you and I have talked about this. They all have tea of some kind, and I love and collect tea. They all have music, and typically it's a wind instrument. I collect the flutes I have from, I've got a huge flute collection from every culture that I've ever been to, and they all have a form of movement. So I have adapted for my personal use. It's an amalgam of different kinds of movements. People will say, you know, what practice do you do? And it doesn't have a name per se, because it is, you know, it is an amalgam of what I've learned from the people in Tibet and the people in the Andes and native traditions in the desert Southwest. But the movement, to me, it's key to honor, and that's the word that comes to me every time that I do this, to honor the presence of the soul in the physical body and that integration. And without that movement, I think that's where the stagnation begins.
Yeah.
It was my introduction to meditation.
Okay.
Something happened to me on my 21st birthday. I was living in northern Missouri. I woke up the morning of my 21st birthday. I remember it very clearly. Something clicked, something changed within me. And on that day, I became a distance runner. On that day, I literally went that day and registered and enrolled in my first martial arts class, and it was self-defense. It was a karate class being taught by Special Forces vet from, at that time, the Vietnam era, that was all about, it was about warfare. And on Mondays and Wednesdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I enrolled in another class of judo, which was all about playing. My instructor would say, do you want to play judo? It's just a completely different mindset. But I remember my first day, it was Bushido-kan, karate. And then my first day in the dojo, he said, okay, we will do a meditation on the mat before we begin. So all the students, we kneeled on the mat for about 3 minutes. And he introduced a meditative technique, and he says, okay, let's begin. And I said, well, wait a minute. Can we just stay in the meditation for a little bit longer? Because something very beautiful was happening there. And he said,
back then, that must have been very novel.
It was, and he looked at me and he said, in a little bit of a condescending way, he said, son, if the meditation is what you're drawn to, you're in the wrong class. But that was my first experience of meditation, and it was 1980s. I began studying yoga with a Sikh mystic in Denver, Colorado, and it was still considered at that time, in the 1980s, the Cold War era, it was considered a cult. And I remember there was a coworker who would go to the classes with me who could not tell his wife and family what it was he was doing because of the stigma that was attached to yoga during that time. But
yeah, people forget kind of what it was like back then, pre-internet, you know, where a lot of ways you hear about this as a book being passed around or going here and going there. A lot of weird fears around that kind of thing.
Brian,